Good evening, colleagues. I'm delighted to be here today with you at the opening of the Society of Economic Geologists 2025 conference. We meet at a time when the role of minerals in society has never been more visible or more contested. And tonight I want to explore what that means for us as economic geologists. But before I begin, I'd like to first acknowledge the traditional owners of Meanjin, the Turrbal and Yagara people. And Steve, thank you for your introduction. I'd like to pay respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to thank the organisers for the invitation to make this address. So let us start in February of this year. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky attends an ill-fated meeting with US President Donald J. Trump in the Oval Office. Trump's aim was, quote, getting some of the rare earth as payment for weapons supplied by the US to Ukraine following Russia's invasion. Negotiations broke down during the meeting, but subsequent meetings would land President Trump his deal. For the global public, this meeting was a crash course in geopolitics of critical minerals. Public conversation about critical minerals has mostly been centred on renewable energy, and at this meeting, this emphasis shifted. Critical minerals were being justified in public as those needed for war. We're going to be taking it, using it for all the things we do, said Trump, including weapons and the military. Access to minerals by great powers has long been an undercurrent of international relations, but rarely is it so openly espoused. This evening, I'd like us to reflect on our role of geologists in this milieu. After all, we are the ones finding these mineral resources. So it makes sense for us to concern ourselves also with who gets access to the minerals that we find. To do this, I will unpack the meaning of some concepts that have not received as much questioning as perhaps they ought to. And I'll share with you some of the evolution of my own thinking and why I believe our current understanding of mineral security is too narrow to meet humanity's needs. Here, let me pause to say a few words about from where my observations come. I'm the fourth generation of my family to make a living from rocks. My great-grandfather ran a small-scale gold mine. My grandfather fossicked for opal, agate and sapphires, and my father drills wells. After studying geology and political science, I've spent most of my career exploring the relationship between minerals and sustainability. Though in recent years, I've come to think of myself as a development geologist, inspired by the development economists like Amartya Sen, who have done so much to aid our understanding of poverty. In 2024, I supported the UN Secretary-General's panel on critical energy transition minerals as an advisor and penholder drafting the report Resourcing the Energy Transition, Principles to Guide Critical Energy Transition Minerals Toward Equity and Justice. And this process was perhaps the first time that minerals had been discussed in a United Nations setting for their positive potential to realise a positive agenda as fuel for the renewable energy transition. Whereas in past processes, minerals have only been discussed for their potential to negatively impact the environment or human rights during extraction. Around a decade earlier than the UN Secretary-General's panel, I was a member of one of the United Nations committees, providing advice on the formulation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And despite our best efforts, we were unable to convince the drafters that minerals should be part of that framework. I'll return to this issue later, but minerals are the only natural resource absent from the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And in that context, the UN Secretary-General's panel on critical energy transition minerals was a watershed moment for inclusion of minerals in matters of international cooperation and development. As the term critical minerals has grown in public consciousness, many geologists have embraced this recognition. It gives us a positive story to tell about our profession. that we're part of providing essential resources to society after years of being critiqued for our involvement in mining and its environmental and social harms. The critical minerals story most commonly told is that a stable supply is needed to feed renewable energy. The academic literature and the popular media go even further, implying that critical minerals are synonymous with energy transition minerals. As an illustration of this point, here you can see Google search trends between 2004 and the present, with a rise in the use of the term critical minerals closely following the rise in popularity of the term energy transition. As a baseline comparison, the terms mineral, copper or coal have not shown any change in the frequency of their use. But it was actually in an earlier event in 2010 that triggered the contemporary focus on critical minerals by many governments, when China halted shipments of rare earth elements in response to an incident with Japan. This event is clearly identifiable on this graph of search trends, and we're going to return to its significance shortly. Also clearly visible on the graph is the huge spike in attention associated with Trump and Zelensky's Oval Office meeting. But while critical minerals is a concept new to the public, it's not in fact a new concept to strategic government planning, especially during wartime. As early as 1917, a geologist within the US War Industries Board compiled a list of strategic and critical minerals, vital to US industry during the First World War, where the US lacked sufficient supply. Mineral commodities like tin, nickel, platinum, nitrates and potash had become difficult to source, and by 1921, the US Army General Staff adopted its first official list distinguishing between minerals strategic for defence and industry, those critical due to shortages, and those essential, even if they didn't meet the criteria of strategic or critical. Between 1917 and 1939, scores of different official and unofficial lists were compiled in the United States, using various definitions, before the Army and Navy Munitions Board approved a new combined definition of strategic and critical minerals as those required for essential uses in a war emergency that are sufficiently uncertain. Frequent changes to the list terminology and policy followed in the United States, but it was the 2010 rare earth crisis that triggered the contemporary interest by a wider array of countries to identify critical minerals and secure their supply. On the 7th of September 2010, a Chinese fishing boat collided with two Japanese Coast Guard vessels off the islands of Senkaku in the East China Sea. The arrest of the fishing boat captain by the Japanese Coast Guard caused a diplomatic incident with China, who was simultaneously halting exports of rare earth elements, of which Japan was a major importer. These events caused prices to skyrocket and revealed the economic vulnerability countries face when the supply of minerals important to their industry are not diversified. Japan's response, which was to invest in diversification, stockpiling, recycling and alternatives, became a blueprint for wider efforts and spurred on the development of strategies and lists of critical minerals and critical raw materials by the European Union in 2011, the United States and Australia in 2018, Japan in 2020, Canada in 2021, the UK in 2022, and India and South Korea in 2023. A number of countries also came together under the Mineral Security Partnership in 2022 to coordinate efforts and improve supply security. These new strategies and lists all use a reasonably consistent definition of critical minerals as a mineral material essential to the economy or national security, which has a supply chain vulnerable to disruption and is essential to manufacturing a product. Around the same time as the rare earth crisis, government policies began to explicitly tie critical minerals to the clean energy transition, recognising that renewable energy technologies also require stable supply of minerals, some of which are in short supply. However, it's worth highlighting that while many people speak of critical minerals and energy transition minerals as though they are the same, the majority of critical minerals are not energy transition minerals. Only 39%, 42% and 40% of the minerals on the European Union, United States and Australian lists, for example, have a use case in the energy transition. And to place a large exclamation point on this, the European Union includes coking coal in its list of critical raw materials. Looking from the other side, the majority of minerals needed for the energy transition are not listed on critical minerals lists. This graph shows energy transition mineral demand for renewable energy technologies and the infrastructure that underpins them, based on 2 International Energy Agency climate change scenarios. Critical minerals make up less than 2% of this demand by volume, while sand, gravel, crushed stone, gypsum and limestone make up around 70% as the key constituents of concrete. Now, even if we were to put aside volume and just look at the proportion of energy transition minerals that have also been identified as critical minerals, the results are surprising. Of the 19 mineral commodities identified by the World Bank and others as important for renewable energy, 36%, 63% and 42% are not identified as critical on the EU, US and Australian lists respectively. Copper and nickel, for example, which are essential, are typically not considered critical due to the diversity of their supply, although there are exceptions like South Korea who list both of these mineral commodities. Let's focus on sand a little bit as a means to illustrate the limitations of using a critical minerals lens alone to frame global policy on the energy transition. As I've illustrated, critical minerals are not a list of minerals that are important. Rather, they're a list of minerals that are in a critical state due to supply disruption. Critical as in a critical care unit of a hospital, not critical as in we can't live without them. And while supply disruption is a relevant issue, any attempt to plan for the energy transition should be concerned about all the minerals that are necessary, not only those with narrow supply chains. Sand, by volume, is the most important mineral product needed for the renewable energy transition. But sand and cement, the key ingredients of concrete, are totally absent from discussion or indeed any planning. And yet they suffer huge supply and affordability issues in scores of countries and very important sustainability and environmental issues that require urgent attention. The slow realisation that critical minerals are not necessarily synonymous with energy transition minerals has led some important institutions to distance themselves from the term. The United Nations Environment Programme and the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative both use the term transition mineral. And those of you in the audience who are chemists will immediately pick up the awkwardness of using the term, as transition metals are already known as a group of 12 elements in the D block of the periodic table. Similarly, for the UN panel on critical energy transition minerals, we were faced with the problem of needing to confine our report only to those minerals necessary for the construction, production, distribution and storage of renewable energy and associated infrastructure. And thus we coined the bespoke term critical energy transition minerals. The African Union also has avoided the term critical minerals in its new green mineral strategy, partly because of a desire to only focus on the minerals of the energy transition, but also because the term critical minerals begs the question, critical to whom? Across Africa, it's common to hear the phrase, critical minerals are not critical to us. And they have a point. If one examines the countries that have defined lists of critical minerals, they have something in common. They are industrialised countries looking to shore up the supply of minerals that they import from elsewhere. There are a few exceptions, such as Australia and Canada, who are mineral producers that predominantly export. But the interesting thing about their lists of critical minerals is that they are defined not based solely on their own needs, rather than the needs of their partners that they're exporting to. If we look at the top mineral exporters across a sample of key minerals, they too have something in common. the vast majority of mineral exporting developing countries without a large industrial base. From the perspective of these countries, and in the context of a one-way flow of minerals from the developing world to the already developed, one can understand why they might hold the view that the critical minerals agenda may not be one that's focused on their needs. While they may or may not be able to secure a meaningful part of the processing value chain, the ultimate utility of the mineral product will be used elsewhere. The newly elected Trump administration, with its open talk about annexing countries to secure critical minerals, is no doubt unique in its approach to international relations. But the underlying message of the critical minerals agenda, that the world should prioritise feeding the mineral security of the already advanced industrialised states who import minerals, is the same across all of the members of the Mineral Security Partnership, including Europe and Australia. But we must take care. A mineral security agenda defined only by national security is prone to emphasising geopolitical competition, especially when the minerals identified as critical are as much about the minerals of war as they are the minerals of the energy transition or the digital transformation. The world has been here before. The original conception of energy security, for example, which was developed as a policy response to the OPEC oil embargo in 1973, started out as a national security approach to energy supply. So too that of food security. It was the Nobel Prize-winning work of Indian development economist Amartya Sen in the early 1980s and 1990s that identified, with reference to food, that it's not broader disruptions to supply that causes famine, but the individual accessibility of food to those people who need it. Sen would go on to publish the first UN Human Development Report with Pakistani economist Mahbubul Haq in 1990, and they and others would coin the phrase human security in the 1994 version of the same report. Human security is freedom from fear and freedom from want. It puts people at the centre of analysis. It imagines the security of all people is much more than their physical safety, and it's intended to complement, not to replace, national security. The human-centred versions of food security, energy security and water security, which emphasise accessibility to all people, would go on to become central ideas of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, it's hard to believe it, but the 15,000-word SDG agenda that the countries of the world adopted makes no reference at all to minerals. Forests, fisheries, wildlife, pasture, energy, water, air and genetic resources are all referenced. Agriculture, water resource management and forest management, they're all described in detail. Farmers, herders, pastoralists and fishers all have a place, but minerals, mining and miners do not. Food is referenced 26 times. Food security provided the authors of the SDGs with the concept to frame a dedicated goal. The same is true with water, another natural resource with a dedicated goal. Minerals not only don't have a relevant goal, but the resource, the occupations, the activities, the sector does not appear at all in the agenda. I believe the reason why we found it so difficult to convince the drafters of the SDGs to include minerals in the agenda is that they could only imagine minerals as a problem for sustainable development. Minerals never went through the same turn towards human security as other natural resources, to highlight the fundamental role that minerals play in meeting basic human needs and in reducing poverty. The implications of this are not only academic. The emission of minerals from the SDGs caused mineral-focused overseas development assistance to plummet to just under $600 million out of $239 billion spent by 2021, representing just 0.23% of development assistance, one of the lowest by sector. In the years that followed the release of the SDGs, I joined the United Nations Development Programme. Here we defined mineral security for the first time, motivated to understand why we had found it so difficult to convince others that minerals were fundamental to sustainable development and more than just a problem to be governed. This was well before the Mineral Security Partnership and before the term mineral security was in wide use. When we published our work in Nature Sustainability in 2022, we could only find 10 other instances of the term mineral security in the scientific literature. For us, mineral security is when all people have sufficient and affordable access to the minerals necessary for human development, including for shelter, mobility, communication, energy and sustenance. A human security approach to mineral security complements the national security approach that is exemplified by critical minerals. It allows us a new and different perspective, one that is universal and relevant to all people, is human-centred, needs-based, focused on accessibility, affordability and sufficiency, and one that promotes multilateralism and international cooperation. While this version of mineral security is universal to all people, our actions should prioritise those who don't have it. If we were to ask, what are the mineral needs of the world's poor, for example, it's likely we would come up with a radically different group of minerals than what currently exists on critical minerals lists. Clay bricks and cement for housing and infrastructure, fertilisers for agriculture, salt for food preservation, chlorine to purify water, fluorspar for fluoridation to protect teeth, and limestone for the toothpaste to keep them clean, glass wool to insulate houses and keep them warm, iron and iodine to fortify food and ensure it's nutritious, and so on. Africa produces 30 million tonnes of mineral fertiliser annually, but accounts for just 3 to 4% of global consumption. In Brazil, the Rocagem movement of subsistence farmers is taking matters into their own hands and pioneered the use of local crushed rocks like basalts and nepheline cyanites to remineralise soils and improve crop nutrients, cutting costs by 80%, while producing crop yields equal to or higher than those obtained with conventional fertilisers. Similarly, Africa consumes only 5% of global cement production, despite accounting for 18% of the world's population. The high cost of imported clinker cement impedes economic development, weakens housing and transportation infrastructure, and slows recovery efforts following natural disasters. Globally integrated minerals-based products like solar panels and batteries are similarly inaccessible. The Democratic Republic of Congo, for example, produces 72% of the world's cobalt, a key component of lithium-ion batteries, but Africa is projected to account for just 0.1% of the global battery market in 2030. The same too in Latin America, who exported nearly 2,000 kilotonnes of lithium between 2002 and 2022, yet only 13 kilotonnes, less than 1%, returned to the region, embedded in finished goods. Last year, at the University of Queensland Sustainable Minerals Institute, we established the Global Centre for Mineral Security. We are a group of geologists, economists, social and environmental scientists, and engineers who undertake research, education, technical assistance and capacity building to improve access to minerals and the utility they provide for development. One of the new initiatives that we've announced is the Mineral Security Hall of Fame. Although mineral insecurity is faced by millions, it's largely invisible. We want to celebrate and share the stories of those who are improving lives by improving mineral access. 4 people were inducted into the Hall of Fame. Memory Toll, a ceramicist, has formed a cooperative that is making electricity insulators, known as bobbins, to connect houses to electricity in Malawi, one of the poorest countries in the world. Imported bobbins are expensive, and Memory's team just filled their first order for 5,000. Ibrahim Jagra from Cameroon found himself holed up in a mud brick house as he sheltered from a raid by Boko Haram. They were directed there by a grandmother who rightly deduced that the clay bricks of traditional huts were not only better insulators for the Sahel climate, but were also bulletproof. Ibrahim went on to form the Bricks of Hope's project, a cooperative of internally displaced people who rebuilds houses, schools and clinics from locally made soil stabilised bricks. Our late friend and colleague Raymond Mohammed, he invited us to Fiji in 2015 to find a way to use local materials to overcome the inaccessibility of mineral products imported to small island developing states. Shortly after this invitation, Cyclone Winston hit. 130,000 people were left homeless, and the post-disaster needs assessment conducted to help the rebuild didn't even look at minerals for the reconstruction. Cement and aggregate were in short supply and out of reach of Fijians wishing to rebuild their homes for resilience. Now, Ray would go on to lead a major effort to bring low-carbon cement to Fiji made from local materials, which not only reduces emissions by up to 40%, but is much cheaper and protective against the salty climate. Ray passed away in late 2023, but his legacy lives on. And finally, we inducted Saloma Nkwazi. Her story is extraordinary. A teacher turned miner, motivated to make the chalk that was in such short supply and impeding her ability to teach her students. Her story is best told by her, so let's listen to a very short video.
My name is Salome Nkwazi, founder and chair lady for Fabragisa Women Mining Cooperative Society Limited. I am a teacher, but retired. I was on the TV in my home. Someone was asking the children in Malawi, the students, that what are the problems at your school? And even a child can know that there is scarcity of chalk in Malawi. She said, the problem is we don't have chalk at our school. So the chalk in Malawi, I saw into it that it is imported from outside countries. So I was like, no, we can do it in Malawi. So this is why I organized my fellow women to start this cooperative so that we can produce chalk from this mineral called gypsum. That I am a teacher, and I have found the problem that chalk is scarce, and I am making chalk back to the country. That can make me very proud and very happy. Yeah, very happy. I'm proud of that, that I can make chalk to give back to the nation, to give back to the children. But we tried our best that we have to plant something in Malawi just to leave a legacy. If I would die, I will leave this for my grand, and I will leave for the nation who will benefit from this. The schools will benefit, in agriculture they will benefit, in the hospitals they will benefit just because of this project. Yeah. Thank you.
So if our goal is a truly sustainable world, then a national security lens will only take us so far. We must concern ourselves also with universal access and affordability to the minerals that matter for human development, the minerals that put a roof over our heads, filter our water, preserve our food, nourish our bodies, and connect us to each other. Now, I'd like to ask for your support to breathe life into this agenda. As geologists, there's much that we can do to help improve mineral access for those that need it. Whether it's the choice of mineral systems that we study, or the people and projects with whom we lend our skills. One small thing we can do is to speak more inclusively about minerals. We can educate the public, not just about the importance of the metals exported to advanced economies, but the huge array of minerals, mostly invisible, that are essential but currently falling short of satisfying the basic needs of millions of people. If we get it right, we can open up a new domain of development studies and a new front in poverty reduction efforts that ultimately might see minerals recognised in a revised version of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We're decades behind other areas, and there's much work to do to use our skills and knowledge about minerals for the betterment of humanity. Thank you very much.